Hey everyone, this is a review of Milwaukee's M18 Gen 2 Fuel 7 1/4 inch circular saw. It is model number 2732-20 bare tool, 21 HD with one 12 amp hour battery. Milwaukee's got a lot of tall claims for this saw, including that it cuts faster than 15 amp corded. We're going to test that out. We're also going to test it out with smaller batteries, including the 5 amp hour and a ridiculously undersized 1.5 amp hour for this saw. This new saw has an upgraded 5800 RPM over the Gen 1's 5000, and the 5800 RPM is pretty standard for corded saws, 15 amp saws, no low blade speed. The shoe of this saw is cast magnesium, as is the upper and lower blade guards, and all of that is included. This is one piece for your bevel gauge and everything. You can see it's just cast in there as one solid piece of magnesium, so very solid design on this saw. The shoe is dead flat. I tested it with one of their red stick levels. There's no warp or anything across the whole length and width of it. The bevel gauge goes from 0 to 50 degrees. I've got it at 45 degrees right now, and at 45 degrees it is dialed in perfectly. The bevel stop at 0 degrees can also be adjusted. Mine came perfect from the factory, but you've got this little set screw for the stop, and you can adjust it from the bottom. So this is actually the second saw Milwaukee sent me, and the reason for that is the first one didn't have the blade aligned with the shoe. So if you take a combination square like this, match it up with the edge of the shoe and the blade, you should get the same distance the whole width. For the first one they sent me, it was about a blade's width off. So I asked them what was going on with that. They said it was definitely not characteristic of how the saw was supposed to be. And they had sent me an early production run, so they thought that might be the issue. So I sent it back to them for engineering analysis to figure out what went wrong in the manufacturing process, and they sent me this new one that is dead on. So I don't think alignment will be an issue for many saws out there, but if you're buying an early one of these, you might want to check for blade alignment, and I'm sure Milwaukee will replace it, or you can take it back to the store if that's the case. Depth adjustment is pretty easy to adjust. You've just got this lever right here, and you've got your gauge on the upper blade guard, and you can actually see they've got notches here cut out with a little bit red paint arrow indicator, so you can see it from the back as well as from the side, because it's a little bit harder to see from the side over here. Probably one of my biggest complaints using this saw is it doesn't have a very good sight line at all into where the front of the blade is. You're mostly going to have to operate off of the kerf indicator in the front. The handle kind of gets in the way, and you got to duck your head a little bit to actually see in here where you're cutting. It does have a spot for a rip guide, but it doesn't come with one. Blade changes are really easy. You've got your Allen key right here stored in the side, and you can reach the blade detent with your hand on the pommel. Just grab it with your thumb like that, push in, and there you go. The saw doesn't come with this new framing blade that they have. It comes with a standard 24 tooth carbide blade that you'll probably want to switch out. The trigger has an ambidextrous thumb safety on it, and they've upgraded the rafter hook from the old version. At MPS they told us they've redesigned it so it won't break as easily. The blade brake on this is also really good and stops the saw very quickly. Another great feature with this saw is they've got a dust chute that you can change out for a dust extraction port. This is a 1.5 inch outer diameter. It's just got one screw you've got to replace. Floor was clean when I started. So the sawdust I have on the ground from 4 crosscuts, and then on the bench, that's all I've got, and this much on the saw. So not perfect, but a whole lot better than no dust collection at all for a regular circular saw. So I'm going to run this against a Ridgid 15 amp corded saw. I am using the same blade, and I made the cuts first with the Ridgid saw. So with anything, I'm putting this Milwaukee at a little bit of a disadvantage from the corded saw. I'm going to test this saw in pressure treated 2x material. The blade depth for both saws will be at 2 inches deep. It will have a rip guide on it just because I want to make sure I'm not binding the saws in any way. I want to make this as fair as possible. I'm going to push these as hard as I can. All right, so you saw this is significantly faster than a 15 amp corded saw when it's cutting with a 12 amp hour battery. It's about the same speed as one and very marginally a little bit faster with the 5 amp hour. So I'm really surprised with the results of this. I did not expect the Milwaukee to be so much faster than a corded saw. I was pushing just about as hard as I could on all of these. One thing to note though, the Milwaukee will stall easier than a corded saw. It cuts faster, but when it hits a knot, it bogs down more and the motor will cut out. So you just gotta watch when you're pushing it through. You gotta listen and feel for it. If you feel it starting to slow down, you better back off your feed pressure. But for normal cutting, ripping a pressure-treated 2x material, it did just fine. Performance with a 12 amp hour battery is absolutely awesome. You are getting a lot more power out of this battery than your standard 5 amp hour ones. Unfortunately, I don't have a 9 amp hour to test with, but I did test with a 5 amp hour. You can feel there's less power, but it is still a very good saw running with a 5 amp hour battery. Absolutely, if you run out of juice on your 12 amp hour battery, you can throw this in and keep going without much of a performance detriment. You're just gonna be cutting a little bit slower. You can rip just fine with a 5 amp hour battery. However, the 1.5 amp hour battery, you're really, and I tested this with a 2 as well, it had the same performance, you're really only going to be able to do cross cuts with this saw in 2x material. I tried ripping, I only got about 12 inches in, 12 to 18 inches in before I just gave up because it kept cutting out repeatedly every few inches of cut, even when I was trying to go slow and let the saw do most of the work without really pushing it too hard. So I do think Milwaukee has true backwards compatibility. I just don't think it's really feasible to be running this saw for demanding applications off a 1.5 amp hour or 2 amp hour slim pack. So if you've got lots of 5 amp hours, I think you really only need one 12 amp hour battery to run this saw and get a lot of good work out of it. So the kit value for this with one 12 amp hour battery and a rapid charger comes out to $400. That's pretty expensive, but if you look at what you're getting for it, the battery by itself is $200, so they've priced the saw bare tool roughly at $200. They don't actually sell this bare tool yet, and I think that's because they wanted to get a good reputation using the most powerful battery pack for it, and after that maybe they'll introduce it bare tool once people know what this can do. So when you look at the competition, this is priced decently competitively against the other ones. If you're looking at FlexVolt or Makita X2, I don't have any of those saws, either FlexVolt or the X2 rear handle, so I don't really know how it performs against those. I do know their claims of faster than 15 amp corded are true though. So let me know if you have any questions in the comment section below, and once again, don't forget to subscribe.